This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in
it. Am going down slow, and I hope and pray it'll be one fine dying day.
Where are you? My wife wanted to know. It was day 2. I had finally gotten an open line to her from near Rosedale. Didn't you know there was a shoot-to-kill order out on the river? I knew the governor had shut down the river to recreational traffic, but we were legit. We were on a press tour. We were safe, right? When we saw the patrol boat speeding towards us, we got real quiet, and I felt the dread weight of paranoia hit my gut. This is a journey. A 300-mile canoe adventure during the height of a flooding river, the Great Flood of 2011. From the top of Mud Island in Memphis to Washington Street in Vicksburg. Rub-a-dub-dub, 3 men in a canoe. And how do you think they got there? Surfing a 300-mile-long wave.
It'll be one fine dying day.
And what adventures befell them. Winter 2011. The snows kept falling all over the Mississippi Valley, in unusual places, like the Sunflower River. The Mississippi drains 44% of America, and the snows had accumulated everywhere in between the Rockies and the Alleghenies. In normal years, the river easily drains snowmelt and rainfall as efficiently as a cook's funnel. However, in some wet years, the funnel spills over, and the floodplain fills up, levee to levee. And here we see the Hatchie River coming down along the base of the first Chickasaw Bluff. The lower Mississippi River begins where the Ohio and Mississippi confluence near Cairo, Illinois. By April, most of the snows had melted, but the ground was saturated across the middle of America, and the snows turned into rains. From April 14th to the 16th, the storm system responsible for one of the largest tornado outbreaks in U.S. history dumped record amounts of rain in the middle and lower Mississippi River Valley, engorging the river almost overnight. In this chart from the NWS Forecast Center, Slidell, Louisiana, you can see the river levels jumping dramatically in northern locations like St. Louis, 7 feet in a week, Cape Girardeau, 10 feet, and Cairo, 8 feet. But Vicksburg, which is highlighted in blue and is our destination, is still in the early stages of the rise and is only coming up 4 feet and hasn't yet reached flood stage. 4 more systems hit in the weeks that followed, quickly producing some of the highest water levels ever recorded on the Mississippi. This rise is a result of catastrophic flooding in most, if not all, tributary systems. Animals were fleeing the bottomlands and exhibiting strange behavior. These are live armadillos, shivering, maybe hypothermic, burrowing near each other. At the beginning of May, they canceled the Memphis canoe and kayak race because the staging area on Mud Island went underwater. And you can see on this chart that in Memphis, the river's gone above flood stage in Memphis, which is at 34 feet. As the big river was rising, tributary rivers were overflowing their banks. And then their levees. And this is the first levee break that I remember on the Black River near Poplar Bluff, Missouri. The river rose to 61.5 feet in Cairo, Illinois, to 47.7 in Caruthersville, Missouri, and to 47.8 in Memphis, each marked near or above historic flood stages. All along the lower half of the river, in Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, the water was cresting at or near levee-topping heights, threatening 6.8 million acres of farmland and town after town after town. It seemed like there was no end to the rise, and now Vicksburg is starting to see a faster rise. The governor shut down the river, and there was talk of a shoot-to-kill order for anyone approaching the levee from the water. I was forced to cancel all trips for 2 months in our busiest season of the year. Myself, 5 guides, 8 apprentices, 3 shuttle drivers, all idled by the flood. And then, out of the blue, I got a phone call. Whoa, from Viking writer Harding Carter of Greenville, who wanted to get flushed down the Mississippi. And so we set Off the Deep End on Stolen Water. These are all books published by Harding Carter, and I recommend Flushed. Day 1, Memphis to below Friars Point, 99 miles. We launched on the Wolf River near its confluence with the Mississippi. The river levels were dropping in Memphis, but they were still rising, only 300 miles downstream. How could this be? We were soon to find out as we chased the crest downstream to Vicksburg. It was an overcast and drizzly day, a cold wind out of the north at 15 to 20 miles an hour, temperature in the mid-40s. Our driver, Ellis Coleman, hollered out, "Don't get arrested." As we left the calm waters of the Wolf, the powerful currents of the Mississippi River swung our canoe around and started us downstream, slowly, implacably. It was May, but the water felt cold. We were in wetsuits. The river scooted us along past Harbor Town with grand views of the Pyramid and downtown. This was the best view I'd ever had of Memphis from the river. We were literally 50 feet higher than usual. Why? Well, simply because the river was 50 feet higher than it usually runs. Our first stop was Mud Island, where muddy water had been flowing through the scale model of the Mississippi River. We floated past Tom Lee Monument with the deer carcass washed up amongst piles of driftwood. It was evident that we were on a falling river. The Memphis and Arkansas Bridge raced overhead as the river charged along at almost 10 knots. Floating under bridges are always special experiences on the Mississippi River. The water piling against the piers and whirlpooling below. When they built this storage facility, they obviously didn't think the water would get so high. We were quickly washed out of Memphis and swirled around President's Island. The water seemed to slow down along the Josie Harry Bar as we entered the state of Mississippi from Tennessee, and on over Cat Island, where we had a view of the Gold Strike Casino. The tallest building in the state of Mississippi, now surrounded by water. The channel below us was long and straight, and we could actually see the curvature of the earth, and river mirages floated on the face of the waters, enlarging the size of distant objects. such as Fitzgerald's and the Tunica River Park
Now you
Museum.
don't say it anymore. Yes, you told me that you love me. Now you don't say it anymore.
In this space shuttle image, you can see the long stretch of river that we were on, almost 10 miles long.
Now you don't say it anymore. Oh, baby.
It stopped drizzling, and the sky finally opened up as we paddled over Rabbit Island.
Whoa, baby. Oh, baby.
At mile 683, the muddy waters were rushing into the forests of Moon Bend. We saw one house turned completely upside down. If we got pinned by the fast water against these big cottonwoods, it would have resulted in certain capsize. At Walnut Bend, we got our first view of Crowley's Ridge. We could hear the Huxtable pumping station through the woods near the mouth of the St. Francis River. This meant that even though the rains had calmed, the tributaries were still overflowing. Huxtable is located where the St. Francis crosses the levee. On a 3-mile wide river, it's hard to tell how fast you're going until you float past a stationary object. Mile 665, we drifted over Buck Island and went flying on past Helena. It was 5:30. In 7 hours, we'd floated 70 miles, a journey that sometimes requires 3 days of hard paddling in a canoe. The day was dragging on as we clawed past Friars Point. I was determined to bring us 100 miles before dark. But the sun had other ideas. We entered Old Town Bend, paddling west into sunset, and exited east into moonrise. It was the full dewberry moon. We had only made 99 miles when it got full dark. Going on internal memory, I guided us to a place I know on Island 63. Except there was no land to be found. But Providence intervened. In the dark, we located a raft of driftwood.
There was happiness.
At this point, Hotting and Chris must have thought I was delirious, picking out a campsite in such a hazardous location. And maybe I was after 99 miles of hard paddling. But I started a fire and got a pot of coffee going. It was a cold night, in the low 40s, crystal clear. None of us slept well, but by the next morning, we were in much better cheer. You can see the canoe pulled up into the drift of raftwood, hanging 30 feet above the forest. Hotting slept in this canoe. Chris had hung his hammock on some willows overhanging the river, and I had placed my head down right on the edge of the raft, and all night long I could hear the water rushing underneath. I woke up at 3 in the morning, not able to go back to sleep, and started another fire and another pot of coffee. And you can see the remnants of our fire in the middle of the raft of driftwood. Day 2, we paddled 103 miles from Island 63 to Leland Neck. The morning light was spectacular. There was a gentle breeze flowing out of the north. It felt like we had entered a heaven made for paddlers. The river was a mass of boils and eddies and whirlpools, all happily flowing through fields of expansive water and then through turbulent tongues of exploding chaos. Here is a serene passage below Island 62, the river glowing with the creamy first light of day. At Burke's, we were met by an upstream tow and a giant beckoning arm that jerked up and down out of the flow of the river. It was a blue log, unearthed from some deep muddy place in the scouring action of the flood. We watched it from a distance and then cautiously approached, and then tied off and floated with it. It was very heavy and very tall. It seemed to be scraping the bottom of the riverbed and twisting and jumping as it did. Hotting got nervous, tied up to this thing, and eventually we untied and pushed on. Around the corner near Island 64, we encounter another blue log floating along. It seemed to change shape as we cautiously approached, and the river makes the inanimate come to life. Keith's Landing, mile 617.7. You can see how the water is pushed over this mile marker and how the land here looks different water levels. High water on the left and medium water on the right-hand photo. A flooded farm near Snow Lake, Arkansas. Water on the Arkansas levee near the same. We were getting overwhelmed by the size of the main channel, and so we paddled on into the woods of a flooded Island 69, where everything that floats is either tied down or has been washed away. And here we discovered where a floating ice chest is born. At the Bungie Grain Elevator, Dennis Landing, it looked a little wet. At Smith Point, the river makes a tight 180-degree bend, leaving west out of Concordia and flowing in a semicircle around Smith Point to be propelled eastward past the old channel of the White River. And here on this map you can see the new channel of the White and the water it carries out of the Arkansas Ozarks. Below Terrene, we found a porch party for turtles and snakes. They all jumped off as we approached, but as we paddled away, I could see them climbing back up onto the abandoned chairs and tables. Downstream of the Rosedale Harbor, the big river gets even bigger. It's the biggest confluence on the lower Mississippi. The Arkansas River coming in from the Rocky Mountains, places like Leadville, the Central Rockies. The river runs wild here. Map makers can't keep up with the changes, and Google Earth is hardly ever accurate. It's a big river, but we weren't alone. Mile 582. We got blue lighted. These 3 boats appeared out of the woods. Was this shoot to kill? Where's your all's license? My license? In my dry bag. We're out here working for Outside Magazine. But with weather like this, it sure doesn't feel like work. Not even a smile. The big guy asked for my license again. Stalling, I asked if he meant my driver's license. Nah, boy, he answered with an exploding grin. Your insanity licenses, 'cause you boys is crazy. They sped on. We continued on downstream. Below the mouth of the Arkansas is the unfortunate town of Ozark. Mark Twain describes this area in his 1883 Life on the Mississippi, with stories from the bereaved hamlet of Napoleon, Arkansas. All that remains of Napoleon is a light named in its honor. Below Ozark, we hit fast water. From Ozark to Catfish Point, we clocked 10 miles in 40 minutes. And from Ozark to Choctaw Island, we went 20 miles in 90 minutes.
Well, this is a journey.
In a canoe, this speed is exhilarating and slightly alarming. You never know what's going to happen when water starts going this fast. We inadvertently scared a young buck getting ready to make shore at Chico Landing. At Choctaw Island, the current seemed to disappear, and the land fell away to the horizon. It felt like we had been washed into an ocean. Around Yellow Bend, and past the old mouth of the Greenville Bends.
Meanders in from the west.
Here you can see changes in water levels in the same place. The Oakley Grain elevator. First view with the high water. Second view with
out here it's the Platte,
medium water from the levee. Adjacent the Greenville Bends, the current of the river seemed to disappear. We were in a mass of water, 15 miles wide. The river spread out levee to levee and flowing slowly through the deep forests along either shore.
For them purple mountains.
The Red Baron flew in for a visit.
Snowcap.
We were wondering, was this a Greenville welcoming committee? Or maybe another shoot to kill? We knew we were getting close to Greenville when we finally saw the monumental smokestack of its power plant. We snuck in through a back channel between the Tarpley Islands. I was looking for a place I know, and a place Hotting remembered playing as a young man. As we paddled into Leland Neck, we weren't sure if we'd find friend or foe. The low-angle sun is blinding. A sudden, alarming commotion commanded our attention. It's a wild pig. Amazing. We have found dry land. It's the only dry land in 300 miles of river. And this pig must be our Greenville welcoming committee. We set up camp. Camp 2, Bluff Camp, mile 537. It was another incredible river night. The moon near full. The power plant had been shut down, and so all was still and quiet. We were awoken the next morning with more of God's special river light. Day 3, we intended to reach Vicksburg, but the wind had something else in store for us. As this chart shows, we'd caught the crest at Greenville. And we felt like now we could surf down the other side of the wave. Paddling away from Leland Neck, we thought this would be the last land we see for at least 2 days until we reached the Lurse Bluffs at Vicksburg. Well, when we got just a couple miles downstream, a vision hit us from the bank, there below the base of the Highway 82 bridge. And going with this vision, we decided to enter the woods, where there used to be an access road, for a resupply of several dozen of Doe's tamales and a couple bags of ice. It was Hotting's sister and his 2 nieces. We paddled back to the river along the base of the old 82 bridge, now minus its center span. You can see the water racing along in front of us, but we caught an eddy below a line of trees to paddle along.
There was another lamb born this evening.
And when we hit the current, it swept us around and shot us underneath the old bridge and down to the new one.
Just like you brought life to.
And here we were slammed by a headwind, 15 miles an hour out of the south. When you're on a river moving 10 miles an hour into a headwind of 15, it feels like a wind at 25. After 3 days of tailwinds, we'd been spoiled. But being good voyagers, we dug our paddles in deep and marked our progress by the diminishing size of the bridges behind.
She's got magic in her finger.
Sliding into Kentucky Bend, we came across a mature willow tree that had been uprooted, and so we tied on and dove into the tamales. This tree carried us 10 miles in a headwind as we enjoyed those
But there was
tamales.
just one thing she couldn't do. She could never make my wife.
We encountered giant exploding boils erupting with ferocity along the edge of Craycraft Chute. From the distance, Hotting wanted to run this white water when we first saw it. But then we all changed our minds as we approached and saw how turbulently it was exploding. Below Craycraft, the river started getting busy, not with tows, but with flocks of least terns who had flown in from South America and were looking for their usual sandbars. The cycle of life. Males fly in with offerings of minnows to try and win the favor of potential mates. If she doesn't approve, she chases them off and awaits a more attractive suitor. Bungie Myersville had its grain elevator doors wide open to the river. Where once was stored thousands of bushels of grain, now was flowing muddy water. It was a grueling afternoon of headwind and hot sun. We paddled past a flooded camp at Transylvania, Louisiana, that looked newly built as spec houses in an area not too high up. Several houses were pushed over. There was a flooded jacuzzi. The water concentrated around Fittler and then exploded through Cottonwood at around 10 knots, and there were fields of choppy current above Willow. Below Eagle Lake Pass, the forest had been mowed over but by what looked like a fairly recent tornado. We thought maybe this was the same system that had produced the violent EF5 tornadoes that ravaged the lower delta on April 25, 2010. Later we found out that yes, that tornado had crossed the river at that point. Mile 458, Terra Landing, completely submerged. This is a familiar location that we operate out of during the annual Mississippi River Nature Festival, otherwise known as Stork and Cork. And here's a view upstream from Terra Landing. The island's covered, but we knew they were intact by the trees sticking up above the muddy flow. Here's the same view during medium water. Low water. Continuing on with the wind still in our face and the sun descending low on the horizon, we decided to cut into the woods near Terra Island and search for a shortcut to Vicksburg. There was no possible dry ground until we got to those bluffs 20 miles downstream. But we wanted to get out of the wind. The question was where to cut through. Using Sailor's seventh sense, I guided us toward an inviting opening in some oaks and hackberries. It opened up into a flooded chapel in the woods. It seemed like a perfect location for our camp number 3, hammock camp. I shimmied up the trees to set the guy lines, and we hung the hammocks. We were going to set up 3 hammocks and make a hammock bunk bed, but I got stung and chased away by some angry refugees. Red ants. We climbed into the hammocks. It felt like we were floating on a cloud. We laid back and breathed a sigh of relief. and the heavens melted into the earth, a dark and mysterious canopy of forest in between. And the crickets and frogs sang us to sleep, and the water gurgled through the trees. A distant, muted roaring could be heard from the river in the main channel, but we were safe here in the woods, protected by the trees. The air was soft and full of the rich aroma of blossoming willows, and the full moon filled the sky above as platters of dramatic cloud shapes shifted through. As we lay there, I thought about all of the deer and boar, coyote, possums, and armadillos, raccoons, snakes, squirrels, panthers, bears, and bobcats, and skinks, leopard toads, and all of the river-teem creatures that used to live here in this forest. Thousands of humans had lost their homes in this flood, and thousands of jobs had been put on standby, like mine. But that number paled in comparison to the millions of wild animals that had been swept away from the islands and the floodplain forests, the fields, and the sandbars. And I reminisced on all that we had seen and experienced in the past 3 days, and all of the islands and scenery I was used to seeing at normal water speed, all jammed up together and passing by 100 miles a day. And this experience had made me dreamy and caused commotions to my imagination. And the question of catching the wave, how would that happen? We figured that all of the oceanic currents accumulating and bulging out of the Arkansas had created a titanic secondary supportive pulse wave that we were able to catch up to in Greenville and then ride as it slowly swelled up into all of the forests, fields, backwaters, back channels, and bayous between the levees of the lower Mississippi River, in some places 30 miles from bank to bank, from levee to levee. The entire lower Mississippi Valley had breathed deep and inhaled water in places it had not inhaled in a long time. It held its breath a long while, letting all the aquifers and dried out wetlands rejoice in the outpouring, and then exhaled in an even longer, slow slide that is still happening as the water trickles back into the main channel, rejuvenated, refreshed. And now the animals have started to return to a fattened floodplain. And ever so slowly the flora and fauna have responded and rejoiced in the cycle of life, the rhythms of the Mississippi, as it poured out into vast wetlands, peaked, and then slowly drained backwards into the mother river from whence the waters had come, in the way that God, the great Creator, had intended originally. And, oh hark! New light was filling the sky, the first gorgeous light of the day, and soon it would be time to move on again, and still we had no idea where we were exactly, nor how to navigate the deep woods with water flowing through.
I'm glad you had a better experience.
And yet, as an old river rat, I knew that wherever the water flowed in, it would eventually flow out. I had to wake Hottie and Chris out of their comfortable hammock beds. I had slept in the canoe with some morning cowboy coffee. You can see it there in the pot. Floating 20 feet above the forest floor, we had our first cup of coffee. It was time to make a plan. Day 4. Our plan was to leave hammock camp, follow Forest Home Chute to Quapaw Chute, and then cut along some deer trails over to the old Yazoo, and then jump the notorious log jam and enter the Yazoo River, the River of Death. And from this point, it was an easy 10-mile paddle down to Vicksburg. And all of this we intended to do by 6 p.m. because we'd gotten a cell phone message that CNN News wanted to interview us. As you can see on this chart, we were reaching Vicksburg with the crest. Across the river and through the woods, to the Yazoo Pass we go. The first problem was finding Forest Home Chute.
Any old live oak is, I mean, old boards, old plant, you know. Did anyone shoot that warehouse?
It was a canoe canopy tour. We were paddling in places normally birds are flying. 10, 20, sometimes 30 feet above the forest floor. Forest Home Chute is a series of braided channels that wind and unwind through the depths of the bottomland hardwood forest below Eagle Lake, sometimes opening up and then closing up again on us. But finally, one medium-sized channel joined another, and it all opened up, and we were fairly confident we had found the chute. We encountered a few flooded hunting camps along the way. We decided to take a tour of one particular house and its grounds. Pretty place. Another porch party for turtles and snakes. Beautiful pecan trees. The barn became a perfect drive-through canoe garage. Forest Home Chute ends at Quapaw Chute. I was following instructions from local expert Paul Hartfield to take a left at this dead end, and so we did. You can see Quapaw Island in front of us, and we're leaving Forest Home Chute. To get into the old Yazoo from Quapaw, we had to dive back into the woods. We hit a dead end at the Yazoo backwater levee, and we were swept into a fast water area where the water spilled over an old stub dike. This was the scariest moment on the whole trip because the water was racing through this very crowded forest, and we were being swept sideways into trees. And it seemed like we were certainly going to capsize and all of our gear was going to go floating away through these woods. And we had no idea where we were, really. But we finally found the old Yazoo River. We followed the old Yazoo to where it abruptly ends at a wall of willows and a gigantic raft of impenetrable driftwood and trash. But we found an opening through which we could maneuver our 24-foot-long canoe. But not before passing the gatekeeper, a big brown water snake. This guy was hiding behind a willow tree. We were now at the Yazoo River, where the old Yazoo River comes in. We had finally made it to the Yazoo, the river of death. And now we could have easily paddled down to Vicksburg in an hour or two and ended our odyssey and become famous on CNN. But the river was playing trickster again with us. The Yazoo was flowing backwards. The Mississippi was rising so strong it pushed the entire Yazoo River back upstream. We decided to go with the flow and see where it brought us. We turned tail on Vicksburg and paddled with the current east, back upstream towards Steel Bayou. Fame would have to wait. The current flowed past another flooded camp with a flooded John boat out back. And then it flowed up to a flooded Highway 465. And here's the bridge over what used to be Steel Bayou. And then it pushed us right up to the Steel Bayou control structure. This is where all the water leaves the lower Mississippi Delta. And you could see from the photo on the top left how high the water was on the Mississippi riverside. But on the other side, the waters of the Sunflower River, Steel Bayou, and all of their tributaries was lower, much lower, maybe 20 feet. These levees had done their job for sure. We found one place along the backwater levee where if the river had risen another 6 inches, it would have meant the evacuation of much of the lower delta, at least from here to Myersville to Rolling Fork to Panther Burn. Humbled and exhausted, we turned back and paddled across flooded fields and farm roads of Warren County. And we might have been lost, but some signage helped us along the way. We re-entered the Yazoo at Kings Point Ferry Landing, and amazingly, the flow had once again reversed and buoyed us along now towards Vicksburg. We floated merrily along, enjoying the scenery along the way. And you can see more places that hadn't anticipated water this high. After 300 miles of paddling from the 4th Chickasaw Bluff of downtown Memphis, we now had a view of the Lurse Bluffs towering above the Yazoo. We turned one last corner, and there was the Mississippi River. Again, way downstream, so far downstream it's over the curvature of the earth. You can see the I-20 bridge, the Vicksburg power plant. We thought we were close, and we were, but like all good journeys, the ending is never quite that easy. We hooked a left to get over to old Highway 61, Catfish Road, the Blues Highway. Now we could see our arrival party at the foot of Washington Street, and the excitement was building. We got ready for celebrations and crunch. We came to a grinding halt on the old Illinois Central Railroad line, just a few feet short of our terminus. The ever-resourceful Hotting jumped out of the canoe and got on the phone and called his wife and me, while Chris went searching for help. Maybe we should have read this sign. We pushed out to try another route. This looked more promising. We approached downtown with the full view of the U.S. Army Corps MV Mississippi. At one time, the largest and most powerful tow in the free world. And the MV Mississippi glared jealously at our 24-foot cypress strip canoe, the Cricket, for having made this beautiful journey. And for the paddler, the journey ends where the water meets the road. And here's our welcoming party at the base of Washington Street in downtown Vicksburg. But alas, CNN had gotten impatient and left. But we didn't care. We were back amongst the company of good friends after making the journey of a lifetime. And so ends one journey, and so begins another. The mighty Quapaw Cleanup Project following the Great Flood of 2011. Cleaning up the landings, islands, and harbors of the lower Mississippi River using stand-up paddleboards, canoes, and kayaks.
Well, you told me in the morning, now you don't say it anymore. Yes, you told me in the evening, now you don't say it anymore. Yes, you told me all day long, now you don't say it anymore. Whoa, baby. Whoa, baby. Well, this is a journey. Start out in the bowels of America, New Orleans, and follow that muddy river north, carving the Chickasaw Bluffs into mud and the Ozarks into sand. At Cairo, Illinois, take the left fork up to St. Louis, and take another left up to Kansas City, and keep going north. And there, a shallow, narrow river meanders in from the west. Willows and elms choke its banks. It's hardly even a creek by eastern or southern standards. But out here it's the Platte, river of the Great Plains. Follow it across Nebraska, and there on the border of Colorado, take the South Fork. And keep your eyes peeled on the western horizon for them purple mountains, rising, snow-capped, and windy. Yeehaw, going west. Well, I was born in the Rockies. Some 34 years ago. Well, I ran away for the first time when I was 3 years old. I'm a reborn man. My home is on my back. I know every inch of the highway, every foot of the back road, and every mile of the railroad track. Yeehaw! Freeborn man, woo! Going west. Woo!